I knew what the dog was before I knew what the man was. That is the whole of my trade in one line. I have been a veterinary surgeon to the Crown Kennels of Eldermore for 19 years, and in 19 years you stop looking at a dog's teeth and start looking at his eyes, his tail set, the way his weight sits over his front feet. You learn that a dog who means harm and a dog who is drowning in fear can look identical to a crowd and nothing alike to you. The morning I am going to tell you about, I was sitting in a kennel van on the wrong side of the palace forecourt, boxed in by a tour coach, running late for a lameness call at the Mews. The window was down, and through it, 30 feet away, on the public side of the gilded rail, I saw a dog being hauled along a cobblestone gutter on a chain. He was a big black and tan working animal, 90 pounds of bone and muscle, and he was choking. Not because he was pulling, because the man behind him had shortened the chain up under the jaw and was walking him on his toes, the way you walk a dog when you want everyone to see you can. The dog's head was up at a cruel angle, his front feet scrabbled, and his eyes were showing white at the corners, and his ears were pinned flat back against his skull, and his tail was clamped so hard beneath him it had disappeared. That is not aggression. That is an animal past the end of himself, a mind gone white with panic, held together by nothing but a chain and a habit of obedience. I put my hand on the door latch. I remember thinking, quite clearly and quite uselessly, someone should stop this, and I remember the coach in front of me not moving an inch. The man on the other end of the chain was broad through the shoulders and pleased with himself. Shaved close at the sides, a jaw he liked, a jacket too heavy for the weather because heavy jackets make a man look wider. And he was steering that terrified animal deliberately straight along the rail, toward the sentry box at the palace's south gate. Toward the guard. The guard's name, though I did not know it that morning, was Corporal Ansel Rooke. He was on the rail post at the south gate, and he looked exactly like every one of them looks and exactly like none of them. Red wool tunic, brass buttons in a line down his chest, the tall black bearskin, white gloves, a rifle grounded at his right side and his right hand resting on it. Boots polished to the point of insult. Eyes level and forward at nothing at all. I had seen him before, though I did not know his name. 3 weeks earlier I had been called to the carriage yard for a mare with a stone bruise, and one of the sentries had sent word that a horse in the third stall was standing wrong. No stableman had noticed. A sentry had a man 40 yards away, through a gate. I remember laughing about it with the head groom. The scarlet statue is a horse doctor now. I remember the head groom not laughing and saying that one notices things. He noticed the dog. I am certain of it, though nothing in his face moved. I was watching him when the man came along the rail with that choking animal, and I saw the corporal's right thumb move, one small stroke along the barrel of the grounded rifle once, and then stop. That was all. It was the only thing about him that was not carved. The crowd came, of course. They always come. 50 or 60 people were strung along the rail in the ordinary way of a bright morning, tourists in bright jackets, a school party being counted. And when a big dog appears on a chain, people do the stupidest possible thing, which is to gather. The man with the chain stopped about 8 feet from the corporal, on the public side of the rail, and turned so that the crowd could get his best angle. He was not there by accident. Nobody drags a dog 3 miles across a city in the heat to walk him past a palace. "Oi," he said, just that at first. "Oi, toy soldier." The corporal looked at the middle distance, at a point somewhere above the coach roofs, which is what they are trained to do, and did precisely nothing. "He's not real," the man announced to the crowd, and got the small laugh he wanted. He had a good carrying voice. "Look at him. He's a statue. He's a statue with a hat." He hauled the chain, and the dog, gasping, came up onto his back feet for half a second. "You want to see him move?" "I'll make him move." Somebody in the crowd laughed. Somebody else, a woman near the front with a child pressed against her hip, said, Don't, that's not, sir. That dog can't breathe. He's fine, the man said. He's a working dog, he works. And then louder for the phones. This dog has put 4 men in hospital. That was a lie, and it matters. I could see the dog's flanks from 30 feet away, and I could see his ribs stacked under the coat like slats in a fence, and I could see the flat pink shine of an old rub scar under his throat where a chain had lived too long. That is not a dog who has been worked. That is a dog who has been kept asterisk. But the crowd could not see any of that. The crowd saw 90 pounds of black and tan, a jaw like a trap, and a big loud man saying hospital asterisk, and they backed up 2 steps and lifted their phones higher. I got the van door open. I want you to know I tried into a gap of about 9 inches between my van and the coach, and I was shouting to the constable at the corner whose back was turned, and to the man himself, "Sir, sir, loosen that chain, you're going to kill him." And my voice went nowhere at all. It went up into the noise of 100 people and a diesel engine and a city, and it died there the way voices do. The man with the chain leaned in over the rail. "I've been thinking," he said to Corporal Rooke conversationally, as though they were old acquaintances, "about what it'd take. Because they all say you lot don't move, not for shouting, not for a slap, not for nothing." He grinned. He had a genuinely pleasant grin which I have thought about a great deal since. "But you'd move for a dog." And then he did 3 things quickly, and every one of them was worse than the last. He dropped the chain from his right hand and gathered the leash into his left, close, so the dog was pinned against his knee. He put his right hand flat on the dog's chest and shoved him backward, hard, which is a thing you do to load a dog, to pack all that terror down into his hindquarters like powder into a barrel. And he put his mouth right down beside the dog's ear. "That's it," he said. "That's it, Ruin. Look at him, look at him." The dog looked. Everything about that animal had gone rigid and terrible. His eyes had fixed on the scarlet shape at the gate, and the whites had gone out of them, and his lips had lifted off his teeth in a long, low, rising note that I felt through the soles of my boots before I heard it. I was out of the van by then. I was running down the outside of the coach with my hands empty and useless, and I was 30 feet away, and it might as well have been 30 miles. The man unclipped the leash. "Take." 90 pounds of dog came off the cobbles like a stone out of a sling. He was over the low rail without touching it. There is no sound in the world quite like it. Not the barking is nothing. The barking is what a frightened dog does when he still hopes not to have to do the other thing, but the sound of claws finding stone and asterisk driving. A woman screamed. The school party's teacher got her arms wide across 4 children and shoved them bodily backward into the crowd. The 2 constables at the corner had turned by then, and neither of them was going to be in time. They were 40 feet off, and a mob was between them. And Corporal Ansel Rooke at the gate, with a rifle in his hand and 8 strides of empty stone in front of him, and a trained attack dog coming for his throat, did the last thing on earth I expected. He put the rifle down. Not down, away. He turned his body a quarter step to the right, and he passed that rifle in one smooth movement, but first to the sentry at the second box, who took it without a word because a hand had offered it. Then Rooke stepped out from the box, into the open, into the dog's line, and he did 4 things so fast that they read as one thing, and I have spent a long time since taking them apart. He turned side on. He did not square up to that dog. He turned his shoulder to him and took his own chest, his own front, out of the picture entirely, because a chest and 2 shoulders and 2 eyes coming at a dog is a asterisk challenge, and a shoulder and a slack hand is a nothing. He dropped his eyes. Not down at his boots off to the side, to a point of stone at his left in the deliberate, insultingly bored way that means, in the only language that dog had ever truly spoken, "You are not a fight, and I am not interested in you." He let his hands go loose and open at his sides, and he stopped moving with a completeness I have never seen in a human being before or since. I have seen dogs go still. I had never seen a man do it. He was not frozen. Frozen is fear. He was at rest in the middle of it, the way a wall is at rest. And he made a sound. It was not a shout. It was not no or down or any of the things 100 people would have screamed. It was a low two-note whistle, dropping, so quiet that I only heard it because I was running and the crowd had gone strange and hushed the way crowds do a half-second before something breaks. 2 notes falling, and then one word pitched down at the bottom of a man's chest, flat and slow and utterly without heat. Hold! 12 feet from him at full drive, that dog's front feet locked. 90 pounds coming at speed cannot simply stop. The physics forbid it. What happened was that his hindquarters came round beneath him and his claws found the seams of the cobblestones and he slewed, sideways, hard, in a long tearing scrape that took him past Rooke's right boot by no more than the width of my hand. And he was up again instantly, and turning, and he did not come back in. He stood off 4 feet away at an angle, sides going like a bellows, hackles up in a black ridge from his shoulders to his tail, and he was making a noise now that had lost every bit of its shape, half a growl, half something else. A broken rising whine cut through the middle of it, because that dog had 2 masters in his head at once and they were tearing him in half. Rooke did not look at him. That was the thing I could not believe. He was standing side-on in the open with a loaded animal at 4 feet, and his eyes were on a paving stone, and his hands were open, and he was breathing. I could see his chest going, slow, deep, deliberately slow, and I understood that he was doing it on purpose. He was breathing for both of them. He was giving that dog something steady to copy. And then, I swear to you this is what happened, he yawned. A long, slack, unhurried yawn, and he turned his face away with it. The dog's hackles went down an inch. He take. The man was at the rail, both hands on the gilded iron, his face gone a color I did not like. Take him, ruin, take. The dog's head snapped round toward the voice, went back to Rooke, round again. He took a half step in and his lips came off his teeth, and the whole crowd made a sound like a wave going out. Rooke lowered himself. He did not kneel. I have heard people say since that he knelt, and he did not, and the difference matters because kneeling puts your weight where you cannot use it. He went down slowly onto one heel, side-on still, his eyes still off to the left, and he let one white glove drop until the back of his fingers rested against the cobbles. Palm down, loose, an offer of nothing at all. And he said in that same low, level, unhurried voice, 3 words in a rhythm that was not ordinary speech. Off steady, line. I heard the dog's breath catch. That is the only way I can put it. 90 pounds of loaded muscle, and something went through him like a hand pulling a thread, and his hindquarters dropped 6 inches, and the ridge along his spine came down, and his ears came up, forward, questioning, off his skull for the first time since I had laid eyes on him, and he stood there in the middle of the palace forecourt with his sides heaving and his head tipped, and his whole shattered mind trying visibly to remember something. Take, the man screamed. Take him, you. Steady, said Corporal Rooke to the dog, very quietly, as though the man on the rail were a bird in a tree somewhere and of no interest to anybody. And the dog walked to him. Not at him. To him low and crooked, and shaking so hard that his back legs kept crossing, the way a dog comes when he is not sure whether he is coming to a hand or a boot. 4 feet. 3. His head was down. His tail was still clamped. And when he was near enough, he did not lunge and he did not bite. He put his muzzle very slowly into the loose white glove that was lying open on the cobbles, and he pushed his forehead against the man's wrist, and he stopped. And then, with a groan that I heard from 20 feet, that dog lay down on the stones at the guard's feet and put his chin flat on the ground. Nobody in that crowd made a sound. 60 people with their phones up and not one of them said a word. And the only noise in the whole of that forecourt was a diesel engine somewhere behind me and the dog breathing, and a man at the rail saying, over and over, in a voice that had gone thin and childish, and utterly unlike the one he had arrived with, "Take, take, take." The dog did not lift his head. I reached the rail then. I got over it. I am 54 years old and I got over a 4-foot gilded railing without noticing that I had. And I came in at a wide angle with my hands low, because you do not run at a dog in that state, and Rooke's eyes came up and found me. And I saw him take in about a quarter of a second, my kennel coat and the slip lead in my fist and the way I was approaching. And he made one small movement of 2 fingers low that said come. I knelt down on the corporal's left, close enough to touch the dog, not touching him. "He's over threshold," I said low. "He'll be over it for a while yet. Don't move that hand." "I wasn't going to," said Corporal Rooke. His voice up close was a countryman's, the flat, unhurried vowels of the hill farms in the north, where I was born myself, and where a man who shouts at a dog is a man who does not have a dog for long. "Where did you learn that?" I said. He did not answer. He was looking at the dog's ear, the right one, which was folded back on itself, and which he was easing open with one gloved knuckle, very gently, the way you would turn a page in a book you did not own. And I saw his face change. I had watched that man take a trained attack dog at full drive without so much as tightening his jaw. And now, kneeling on the cobbles, Corporal Ansel Rooke looked down at the inside of that dog's ear, and something went out of him. I leaned in. There on the thin pink skin inside the flap of the ear, faded almost to nothing, blurred by years, was a tattoo. A letter, a numeral, and a 5-figure number. KVI/40,118. I knew the mark, of course I knew it. I had put that mark on dogs myself with my own hands in the tattoo room at the Crown Kennels at Ashmere on litter after litter of 8-week-old pups. KVII, Kennel 7, the working section, our asterisk section. That dog belonged to the Crown. "Oh," I said, "it came out of me quite stupidly. Oh no." And Corporal Rooke, kneeling in the middle of the forecourt with his hand under the chin of an animal that 90 seconds earlier had been coming to kill him, said one word, so quietly that I do not believe another living soul heard it. He did not say it to me. He said it to the dog, and the dog's tail, that clamped, hidden, ruined tail, moved once against the cobblestones. He said, "Bracken." Here is the part of the story I have had to tell in 3 courtrooms, and it never gets any easier to say, because it is the part where we lost. The constables came, 2 of them at first, then 4, then a sergeant, and then a great many people in a great many uniforms, which is what happens at a palace when anything at all occurs. They wanted to know who had been bitten. Nobody had been bitten. They wanted to know where the animal was. The animal was lying on his side on the cobblestones with his chin across a royal guardsman's boot, and a veterinary surgeon of the Crown Kennels had a slip lead loose around his neck and 2 fingers on the pulse under his hind leg, and she was telling them, in a voice she was working hard to keep pleasant, that if anybody came at him with a catch pole, she would have their license. They wanted, most of all, for Corporal Rooke to get up. He got up. He did it slowly, and he did it in a way that took his weight off that dog by degrees rather than all at once, and when he was standing, he put his hand out to the sentry from the second box, and that man put the rifle back into it, and Rooke went back to his place at the rail and grounded it and squared his shoulders and looked at the middle distance. Just like that, as though he had stepped aside to let a lady pass. His bearskin was crooked. There was a long gray smear of cobble grit down the skirt of that beautiful red tunic, and I watched 100 people watch him stand there and be a statue again, and I understood something about him that I could not have put into words for another month, that going back to the rail was not indifference. It was the only thing he had left to hold. Because by then, The man was talking to the constables. "He's mine," Corbin Slake said. "I learned the name that morning. The sergeant wrote it in his book and I read it upside down and I have never once forgotten it. He's my dog. That's my dog and that man's got hold of him. He slipped his collar, that's all. He got out and he ran and the soldiers got hold of him and I want him back." "Sir, we've 11 people saying you took the leash off." "He slipped it." "And the word you were shouting." "That's his name," said Slake. "That's his name, isn't it? Take, funny name, foreign." I laughed. I could not help it. It came out of me flat and ugly, and Slake's head came round, and I got my first proper look at his face, which was not a bruiser's face at all. It was a careful face. There was a mind behind it, working quickly, and I saw it arrive at the thing it needed and take hold of it, and I felt my stomach drop. "He's chipped and papered," said Slake. "Go on, read the chip." The sergeant looked at me. I looked at Slake. And then I got my scanner out of my bag and I ran it along the back of that dog's neck, and the little gray screen lit up with 15 digits and my mouth went dry. Because the chip was there. It was there and it was registered and it had been re-registered. That is the word on the record, asterisk re-registered. A transfer of ownership lodged, filed, stamped, and paid for 11 months earlier. And Slake, who had come to a palace to make a dog kill a man in front of 60 phones, put his hand inside that heavy jacket and pulled out a folded document in a plastic sleeve, and held it up so the constables could read it, and so the phones could read it, and so that I could read it. Crown Kennels of ELDERMOR, ASHMERE, Certificate of Surplus and Lawful Rehoming. Animal KVII/40118. Kennel name, Bracken. Disposal, decommissioned unsuitability. Rehomed to, C. Slake of the Wicket Lanes. Authorized by, ODRAGE Registrar. I stood in the middle of the palace forecourt holding a slip lead attached to a crown-bred, crown-marked, crown-trained working dog, who had been given away with our own seal at the bottom of the page, and I could not think of one single thing to say. The sergeant read it twice. He was not a stupid man and he did not like it, and he said, carefully, "There'll be a summons in this, sir. Setting a dog on, public alarm. There will very much be a summons." "Fine," said Slake, "summons me," and he held out his hand for the lead. "You can't," I said. "He's his," said the sergeant, and he had the decency to look sick about it. "Doctor, he's his. There's a paper. That dog has a chain scar on his throat you could lay a finger in. Then you get an inspector down there and you prove asterisk it," said the sergeant, "and I will kick that gate in myself, but I can't take a man's property off him in the street on a Tuesday." So I gave him the lead. That is the sentence I have said in 3 courtrooms. So I gave him the lead. I put the slip over that dog's ears with my own hands, and I held it out, and Corbin Slake took it and gathered it short and hauled, and Bracken got up off the cobblestones sore and stiff, and utterly finished and quiet, and went with him. At the corner, Slake stopped. He looked back at the rail, at the red tunic and the bearskin, and the man inside them who was standing at attention and looking at nothing. "I'll see you again," he said. And Corporal Ansel Rooke looked at the middle distance and did not move, and the whole business had lasted, from the first oi to the last, somewhere under 6 minutes, and by nightfall 11 million people had watched it. You will have seen it, everybody saw it. Somebody put music under it, which I have never forgiven. They called it the Whisper asterisk. That was the caption on the version that went round the world. The guard who stopped an attack dog with a whisper. 14 seconds, shot at an angle, wobbling, the sound half-wind. You can hear the man screaming take and you cannot hear Rooke at all, which is exactly why it went round the world. People said all sorts of things about what he had done. A man on a talk program said the guard had dominated the animal, and I threw a shoe at my own wall. None of them were close. What Corporal Rooke had done was not magic and it was not dominance. It was a language. It was a specific, taught, drilled, hard-won language, and he had spoken it with an accent that dog had not heard in 3 years, and the whole of it had taken him about 9 seconds. I know this because I went to Ashmere the next morning and pulled the file. The Crown Kennels sit 11 miles north of the city, behind a long gray wall, and I have loved that place since I was 22 years old. 200 dogs, brood kennels, whelping rooms, the runs, the training grounds, the old stone tower where they keep the records. Kennel 7K, VII, is the working section. The dogs who go out with the constabulary and the household regiments, who find the man in the dark and the powder in the crate and the lost hill walker at the bottom of the gully. The records room is up 2 flights and smells of dust and old paper and faintly and eternally of dog. I signed the book. I asked for K, VII/40,118. The clerk, a young man named Petrie with a cold and an honest face, went away and came back after a long time with a thin buff folder and an expression I did not like. "It's been thinned," he said. "It's been what?" "Thinned, weeded. There's a weeding schedule for decommissioned files, doctor, after 12 months. "There is a weeding schedule," I said, "for *dead dogs." Petrie went red and did not argue, because he knew as well as I did that I was right, and because he had put the folder into my hands rather than into the shredder, and that took some nerve, and I have not forgotten it. I sat down at the long table under the window and opened it. There was very little left. A photograph curling of a black and tan pup of about 8 weeks standing on a scale with an expression of profound personal outrage. A vaccination card in my own handwriting which stopped my breath for a moment. A litter registration, Dam, Wick, Sire, Halloran's Fen, whelped 3rd of Frost Month. 6 live. Kennel names, Bracken, Sorrel, Tansy, Gorse, Rye, Thorn. A single training progress sheet. From the puppy walk, the first 6 months, when a dog is being taught nothing but the world and his name and the shape of a fair deal. And at the bottom of that sheet, in a box-headed foundation handler ***, a name had been ruled through with 2 hard strokes of a pen. You could still read it. A pen stroke does not unmake ink. A-R-O-K-E. I sat in that dusty room with the pigeons going about their business on the sill, and I looked at the name for a long time. Then I turned over the last page in the folder, a disposal slip, 1 line of typescript, the whole of a life summed up by a clerk. 40,118 Bracken decommissioned, unsuitability, fear reactive, failed gunfire habituation. Surplus, rehomed private 14th green month per registrar. And underneath, in the signature box, the same clean, confident copperplate I had seen in a plastic sleeve on the cobblestones the day before. Oh, drage. Fear reactive. I looked at that phrase for a long while too. It is not a lie, exactly. That is what makes it such a beautiful piece of paperwork. Bracken was fear reactive. I had seen it in the forecourt, in the white of his eye and the clamp of his tail. But a dog is not born fear reactive at 8 weeks with an outraged face on a scale. A dog is made fear reactive by an accident, by an illness, by a single unlucky day. And I have known them to be made so by a man with a chain. I put the folder in my bag. I am not proud of it, and I would do it again. And I went down the 2 flights of stairs and out across the yard toward the runs, and I stopped, because the thing that had been standing behind me all morning finally tapped me on the shoulder. Foundation handler. That is the man who takes a pup at 8 weeks. He is the first human being in that animal's life who is anything more than warmth and milk. He teaches him his name and the difference between a hand that is coming to lift him and a hand that is coming to hurt him. A difference we build very carefully, because we are going to ask that dog for extraordinary things, and he must know, in the marrow, that we are worth it. He teaches him 3 words, just 3 at first in a rhythm, always the same rhythm, so that the sound of them goes down into a place deeper than obedience. Off steady line. And I thought, where have you been, Ansel Rooke? And I thought, and why does your name have a line through it? Getting to speak to a royal guardsman is not like getting to speak to anybody else. I tried the ordinary channels for 2 days and was passed, with immense courtesy, from one office to another until I arrived back at the office I had started in. The palace was not hostile. The palace was asterisk smooth. On the 3rd day I gave up on the ordinary channels and went to the mews with a bag of veterinary instruments and a lie about a mare's foot, and I found the head groom and I said, "That guardsman, the one with the dog, who is he and who is his officer?" The head groom looked at me for a while. "He'll be at the rail Thursday," he said. "And his officer's Captain Loris Thane, and I'll tell you now, Doctor, Captain Thane would rather this had happened to somebody else." I got in to see Captain Thane on the Friday, in a small paneled room in a wing of the palace that visitors never see. He was perhaps 45, beautifully turned out, and tired to the bone. There was a stack of paper on his desk that he kept squaring with his fingertips. "Dr. Hale," he said, "you are the 3rd veterinary surgeon, the 9th journalist, and the 22nd member of the public to ask me about Corporal Rooke this week. Do you know how many of them wanted to give him a medal, and how many wanted him charged? I imagine it's about even." "It is exactly even," said Captain Thane, "and that is the trouble." He turned a paper round on the desk and pushed it toward me with one finger, the way you would push a dead thing. It was a complaint, a formal one, lodged with the household and copied to 2 newspapers, alleging that on the morning in question, a sentry of the Royal Guard had abandoned his post, surrendered his weapon to another man, and knelt in a public forecourt to fondle a dangerous animal, thereby exposing the public and the palace to grave risk. It was signed C. Slake ***. It had been drafted, quite obviously, by a lawyer. "He has a lawyer," I said. "He has a good lawyer," said Thane, "which is an interesting fact about a man who lives in the Wicket Lanes, and I would be grateful if you did not say it out loud in this building." He squared his stack of paper again. "The corporal surrendered his weapon. That is what they will hang him on if they want to hang him, not the dog, the rifle." "He surrendered his weapon," I said slowly, "because he was about to have a frightened animal at close quarters, and he did not want a firearm in his hands. Captain, he did the most disciplined thing I have ever watched a human being do." "I know that." "Then, Dr. Hale." Thane looked up, and I saw that the tiredness went all the way down, and that he was not a coward, only a man who could count. "There are people in this palace who believe that the correct response to that dog was a bullet, and that we would have had one dead animal and no video. They are not monsters. They are simply people who have never in their lives had to think about what a dog is ***. And every hour that this thing stays on the news, their argument gets easier to make." He pushed the complaint back into the pile. "The corporal is off the public rail as of Monday, interior post. It is not a punishment." It is a punishment. "It is a precaution ***, said Captain Thane, and had the grace to look away. I was at the door when he spoke again. "Doctor, when you find him, and you are plainly going to find him, so let us not pretend, ask him about the Wetherby night." "What is the Wetherby night?" "That," said Captain Thane, "is exactly what I asked, and I did not get an answer, and I am his officer." He squared the paper one final time. "Good afternoon." I found him on the Sunday, off duty, in a public garden 2 streets behind the barracks, sitting on a bench with a paper bag of chips and a book, dressed like the most ordinary man in Eldermore, a plain coat, a flat cap, boots that had been mended. He looked smaller out of the tunic. They always do. It is the great secret of that uniform. I sat down at the other end of the bench without asking. "Dr. Hale," he said, without looking up from the book. "You know my name." "You put your name on the vaccination card," said Corporal Ansel Rooke. "M. Hale, 19 years of them, I used to file them." He turned a page. You've been to Ashmere. How do you know that? You smell of the tower, he said. Dust and old paper and disinfectant. It doesn't come out for a day. And that was the first time I laughed since the forecourt. I put the buff folder on the bench between us. He looked at it for a long moment and did not take it. He's alive, I said. That's the first thing you want to know, so I'll say it first. The constabulary sent an inspector to the yard in the Wicket Lanes on Thursday. He was not admitted because there was nobody home, which is the oldest trick there is. But a neighbor says the dog is alive, and the dog is chained, and the dog is quiet. Quiet, Rooke repeated. Yes. He set the book down on his knee. That's worse, he said. I know it is. We sat there for a while. 2 children were sailing a paper boat in the fountain, and 11 miles north of us 200 dogs were being fed their evening feed, and 3 miles east of us 1 dog was on a chain in a yard, being quiet. Foundation handler, I said. K7, your name's on his puppy sheet with a line through it. Yes. Why the line? Because they took it out of the section, said Rooke. When a handler leaves under a cloud, they strike him off the sheets. It's tidy. It doesn't change what he taught the dog. And the cloud? He looked at the fountain for a while. What I got was a man who talked in the flat, orderly, entirely unsentimental way of somebody making a report, and it was very much worse. 3 years ago there was a night operation, he said. A house in the Weatherby district. A man wanted for a great many things, believed armed, believed to have another man in there with him who did not want to be there. Constabulary tactical team and 1 dog section, and I was the dog section. My dog then was a bitch called Wick. Wick, I said, and my voice came out strange. Bracken's Dam. Bracken's Dam, Rooke agreed. 6 years old, best dog I ever had. Best dog anybody ever had. Go on. The floor was gone, he said. The house had burned 2 years before and been boarded and never mended, and the whole of the upper floor was joists and char and nothing else, and you could see it from the stair if you looked, and the officer commanding did not look. He wanted the dog sent up. Send the dog up, clear the top floor, then we go up behind. He shrugged slightly. That is what the doctrine says, and there was no floor. So you refused. I said the floor was unsound and I would not send her. He said again. I said again. He said it a 3rd time, and he said it in the way officers say a thing when they have decided that the next word out of their mouth is going to be your name in a report. Rooke picked up a chip and did not eat it. So I said no, sir, and I unclipped her, and I put her in a downstay at the foot of the stair, and I went up the stair myself. I did not say anything. The joist went at the 4th step, he said. I came down through the ceiling into the parlor, broke this. He touched his left forearm without much interest and 4 ribs and something in my hip that they never entirely put back. The wanted man came out of the back door and was arrested in the garden. The other man, the one who did not want to be there, was in the cellar, and he was quite all right, and he is now a plumber with a family. And Wick? Wick stayed in her downstay, said Rooke, at the foot of the stair with the ceiling coming down. She did not move. She held that stay for 11 minutes with her handler unconscious in the next room and half a house on the floor around her, because that is what she was taught, and because she was the best dog anybody ever had. He put the chip down, and when they lifted the beam off me, she came across the room and lay down against my back and would not be moved by 4 grown men, and one of them was crying, and it was not me. The fountain went on. They gave me a choice, said Rooke. That is the fair way to put it. Nobody was cruel. The officer commanding wrote in his report that a dog handler had refused a lawful order in the presence of a tactical team, which was true, and that his refusal had introduced delay and risk, which was true. And the kennels wrote that a handler with a hip that would not take a scramble wall could not stay in K7, which was truest of all. So there was a board, and the board was very polite, and at the end of it I was invited to consider a transfer to a ceremonial post, where the standing is on flat stone. And Wick retired to a farm in the north, said Rooke, 8 months later, and died there 4 years on in front of a fire at the age of 11, which is a very great age for a working dog and better than any of us deserve. He said it without a tremor. I have her collar. He looked up then, and I saw his eyes properly for the first time, gray and steady, and behind that, somewhere a long way down, something that had been carrying a weight for 3 years without once putting it down. She whelped that litter 8 weeks before Weatherby, he said. 6 live. Bracken was the big one and the soft one. He hated the whelping box and he loved the yard broom, and he could not be left alone for a minute or he would sing. He was quiet a moment. I put his first collar on him. I taught him his 3 words. And then I went through a ceiling, and I went to a board, and I went to a rail in front of a palace, and I never touched a dog again. Ansel, I said, you have to get him back. I know, said Corporal Rooke. That is why I'm telling you all this, Doctor, and not because I like the sound of my own voice. He picked up the buff folder at last. Because I cannot do it. A serving guardsman cannot lodge a complaint against the registrar of the Crown Kennels. He cannot go to a magistrate. He cannot go anywhere near that yard in the Wicket Lanes, because the moment he does, that man's lawyer has him for harassment, and I am out of the guard and Bracken is still on a chain. He closed the folder and held it out to me. But you can, he said. You are the veterinary officer of the Crown Kennels. You have a warrant card and an inspection power and 19 years of signatures on every card in that tower. His voice did not rise at all. Dr. Hale. I have stood at that rail for 3 years and been shouted at and photographed and spat near, and I have not once wanted to break. And I want to break now. So please, will you go and be the law before I go and be a fool? I took the folder. 3 months, I said. What? There are 3 months in that file that don't exist. He was disposed of on the 14th of Green month. The chip was re-registered to Slake 3 months later. I tapped the buff cover. A dog does not spend 3 months in a filing cabinet. He was somewhere. He was with somebody. And whoever that somebody was, they had him long enough to turn a soft big pup out of a good litter into what came over that rail at you. Rooke was very still. Then find the 3 months, he said. Oswin Drage received me in the registrar's office at Ashmere on a Tuesday morning, and gave me tea, and was charming for 25 minutes. He was a tidy, pink, pleasant man of about 60 with half-moon spectacles and a waistcoat, and he had been registrar for 19 years, exactly as long as I had been a surgeon there, and we had eaten 100 lunches at the same long table. He asked after my sister. He remembered her name. That is the thing about a certain kind of man. He remembers your sister's name, and he sells a dog into a chain, and he does not experience these as facts about the same person. Bracken, he said, tasting it. Bracken, yes. A great pity, and I will tell you frankly, Murren, that when I saw that dreadful film I sat down and put my head in my hands. He was decommissioned as Fury Active. He failed gunfire habituation. Twice. Drage spread his hands. You know as well as I do what that means for a K7 dog. He cannot go out with a section. He cannot go near a crowd. He is a very fine animal who cannot do the only job we have. What would you have had me do? Rehome him with a handler. We did rehome him, said Drage, and his voice was gentle and reasonable, and it made the hair go up on my arms. To a private applicant who filled in a form and provided a reference and was inspected and passed. I cannot police a man's soul, Murren. I can only police his paperwork. And if his paperwork is in order and he turns out afterward to be a brute, well, that is a tragedy, and it is not a crime, and it is certainly not a crime of *mine*. Show me the inspection report. Certainly. He did not even hesitate. He rose and went to a cabinet and came back with a single sheet, and it was perfect. Address, yard, fencing, kennel provision, water, satisfactory * in a box initialed. The initials were not his. They belonged to a man named Yarrow who had left the kennel's employment 9 months ago and had, when I eventually ran him to earth, a very shaky memory and a new boat. "Murren," said Drage, sitting back down and folding his hands, "you are angry. You are angry because you saw the film and because it was one of ours and because you tattooed that ear yourself. I am not unfeeling, but you must not let it make you foolish." He smiled at me over the half-moons. "There are 200 dogs in this establishment. 14 or 15 a year go surplus. You cannot take every one of them home." And there it was. I did not blink. I smiled back, and I finished my tea, and I asked after his roses, and I went out of that office and down the stairs and across the yard and got into my van and sat in it with my hands shaking on the wheel. 14 or 15 a year. I had asked about one dog, one. And he had told me, unprompted, that the number was 14 or 15 a year, in the tone of a man producing an excuse he had already rehearsed. Which meant he had rehearsed it. Which meant that somewhere in that tower there was a list. It took me 9 days, and Petrie with the cold helped me for 6 of them, and then, when I told him plainly what I thought we were going to find, kept helping. We did not need the thin files. That was Drage's mistake, and it was the mistake of a man who has never in his life had to feed 200 dogs. He had weeded the disposal folders. He had not weeded the feed book, or the transport log, or the veterinary movement register, or the tattoo ledger. A dog cannot be erased from a working kennel because a dog eats. By the end of the 9 days, we had a list. 22 dogs over 4 years. Every one of them KVII. Every one of them decommissioned for one of 3 reasons: fear-reactive asterisk, failed habituation asterisk, unsuitable temperament. Every one of them signed off by O. Drage. Every one of them rehomed to a private applicant, and here was the part that made my hands go cold. There were only 3 applicants. 3 names, 22 dogs. A haulier in the Eastern Docks. A security consultant with an address that turned out to be a stationer's shop. And 7 times a man in the Wicket Lanes named C. Slake. And in every single case, between the disposal date and the re-registration of the chip, there was a gap, 2 months, 3 months, once 5. "They're being held somewhere," said Petrie, in a voice like a man walking into cold water. "Between." "They're being made asterisk," I said. Because I had worked it out by then. And for a long time afterward people insisted on describing this as a story about one cruel man and one brave dog, and it is not. A good working dog costs a fortune and takes 2 years, but a frightening dog, a dog you can wave at a debtor, a dog whose job is not to do anything but to promise. A frightening dog can be had cheap, if you know where to get one. And if you are willing to take a soft, ruined, gun-shy animal who has been bred and shaped for 200 years to want to work for a human being, and put him on a chain in a yard until the wanting turns into terror. They were not buying attack dogs. They were buying good dogs and breaking them into attack dogs. And they were being supplied, on crown paper, with a crown seal, by the registrar of the Crown Kennels, and every one of those dogs had a number tattooed in its ear that could be read by anybody who cared to look. Which is why, when a guardsman lifted a fold of skin on a public forecourt in front of 11 million people, Corbin Slake did not merely lose his temper. He panicked. I went to the Wicket Lanes on a wet Thursday, lawfully, with my warrant card and an inspection notice, and a constable named Hobb who had asked to come, and who said very little and missed nothing. The yard was behind a hoarding at the end of a lane, and you could smell it from the corner. Not filth. Slake was not a slovenly man, which is somehow worse. It was the smell of concrete that is sluiced daily and never dries, and of a great many animals kept in a place with no earth in it. There were 4 dogs, 2 lurcher crosses on running chains, a young black one with cropped ears in a mesh pen, who came to the wire and wagged. And Bracken at the back, on a chain bolted through a concrete block in the rain. He was thinner. 9 days and he had dropped weight off a frame that had none to give, and he had a new sore on the near hock from lying on wet concrete, and he had positioned himself with his back against the wall in the corner where the chain would just reach, which is the only decision a chained dog is ever allowed to make. He did not bark at us. Not one of them barked, and if you have ever been in a kennel you will know what that means and how loud it is. I stood at the gate with the rain coming off the hoarding and I made myself be a professional. I wrote, water, green, algal, no clean supply. Shelter, a barrel unbedded, body condition 2 of 9. Chain, 1.4 m, running weight excessive. Ulceration, hock near hind. Historic chain abrasion, ventral neck. Every line of it was a nail and I drove them slowly. And halfway through, the door of the shed opened and Corbin Slake came out in his shirt sleeves with a mug of tea. Well, he said. He looked at my card. He looked at Constable Hobb. He looked, with real interest, at my notebook, and then he leaned back against the door frame and drank his tea and watched me work, and he was not frightened at all, and that told me exactly how well he understood the machinery he was standing in. Improvement notice, he said when I had finished. That's what you're writing. 28 days to fix the water and the bedding and get the sore seen to. And in 28 days you'll come back and there'll be a new barrel and a clean bucket and a bit of straw, and you'll write asterisk satisfactory in your little box, and I will still have my dog. He drank. I've read the act, Doctor. It's very short. There is also, I said, a section on causing unnecessary suffering. The suffering. He nodded at Bracken, who had not moved and whose eyes had never once left the corner of the yard where I was standing. He's fed, he's watered, he's got a barrel, he's a working dog doing a working dog's work. You lot decommissioned him, you threw him away. I took asterisk him. And he smiled, and I understood that in his own mind he was the wronged party and that he believed it entirely. You've a nerve, you know, coming down here with a card. You people had him first. That went in under my ribs, and he saw it go in, and his smile got warmer. And then he set his mug down on the step and walked over to the concrete block and took hold of the chain, and I said, "Don't," and he did not even look at me. "Ruin," he said, "up." The dog got up. He got up the way a beaten thing gets up, in stages, ready to be wrong about it, and he stood at the end of the chain with his head low and his tail clamped in the rain, and I heard Constable Hobb behind me let out a slow breath. "There," said Slake, "see, obedient." He hauled a foot of chain in around his fist. "Ruin, watch." And that was when it happened, and I have thought about it every day since. Bracken did not watch. Bracken did not do anything Slake told him to do. What that dog did was lift his head and turn it, past me, past the constable, past the gate, and stare down the wet lane at the corner of the hoarding. And his ears came up off his skull, up and forward and questioning, exactly as they had come up on the palace forecourt. And then he pulled. Not at us, not at anybody. He put his whole ruined weight into the collar and he pulled toward the corner of the lane, toward the street, toward the north asterisk, with the chain going tight and the concrete block scraping an inch across the yard. And he made a sound I had heard once before in 19 years, from a bitch in a run at Ashmere on the morning her handler came back from 6 months away, and it was not a growl. It was the sound at the bottom of a dog's chest that means I know that. I know that, let me go. There was nobody at the corner. I looked. There was a wet lane and a hoarding and a scrap of sky. But 3 miles north of that yard, in a small paneled room, a man in a plain coat and mended boots was, at that moment, standing to attention in front of Captain Loris Thane and being told the terms of his interior posting. And I have never once been able to make the arithmetic of that work, and I have long since stopped trying. Slake looked at his dog. Then he looked slowly at the north end of the lane, and then at me. And I watched something arrive behind that careful face, an idea, whole, the way a bad idea arrives, and I would give a great deal to have that half-second back. He had spent 11 months making a weapon. And he had just discovered, standing in the rain in his own yard, that there was one man alive in the kingdom of Eldermore who could take that weapon out of his hands with 9 seconds and a whisper, and that the whole world had watched him do it. "Get out of my yard," said Corbin Slake very pleasantly. We got out of his yard. I served the improvement notice, and Hob photographed everything, and I drove 11 miles north with my jaw aching, and I did not know. I want to be clear that I did not know, because if I had known, I would have chained myself to that gate, that I had just watched a man decide to kill a dog in front of a nation. The papers came 8 days later, and they came from Slake's good lawyer, and they were beautiful. An application to the magistrates for a destruction order. The animal known as Ruin, formerly Bracken, K. VII 40118, being an animal of proven and dangerous propensity, having on the 4th day of Blue Month attacked without provocation a serving guardsman in a public place before numerous witnesses, and being an animal which the applicant, as owner, no longer feels able to control or to warrant safe to the public. The applicant, with regret, and in the public interest, applies that the said animal be humanely destroyed. With regret, 12 words in, and with regret asterisk. I read it standing up in my kitchen, and had to sit down on the floor. Do you see it? It is the loveliest piece of work I have ever seen done by a wicked man. He could not simply take Bracken out into a field, because that dog was now flagged in 3 separate constabulary files as material to an ongoing investigation, and if he had gone missing, there would have been an inspector at that gate inside a day. He could not keep him, because sooner or later a court was going to order that dog seized and examined, and an examination meant a chip, and a tattoo, and a disposal slip, and a name in copperplate at the bottom of it. So he would have him destroyed by the court asterisk, lawfully, on the record, with regret, and when the needle went in, the ear went with it, and the chip went with it, and the only witness to a 4-year traffic in broken dogs went into an incinerator with the seal of the magistracy on the paperwork. And it did a second thing, which was the thing his lawyer would have been paid for. In order to get that order, they would have to prove the dog asterisk dangerous, and the proof they were offering was the forecourt. A 90-pound animal launched at a royal guardsman, and a royal guardsman who had put down his rifle and gone to his knee, in defiance of every standing order in the household, and had thereby, the application said this in the flattest possible language, encouraged in the animal an attachment which renders it unpredictable, and its behavior incapable of being safely managed by its lawful owner. The dog was dangerous because Ansel Rooke had gentled it. If they won, they killed Bracken and they finished Rooke in the same afternoon. We had 11 days. I will not pretend those 11 days were orderly. I filed for a seizure order of my own, under the Welfare Act, on the strength of the improvement notice and Hobbs' photographs, and it was contested, and a hearing was set for the same week. I took the 22-name list to the constabulary and was passed up 3 ranks in 2 days, and at the end of it, a superintendent with tired eyes told me that fraud on a Crown establishment was a very serious matter and would be investigated with the appropriate care, which meant months. Bracken had 11 days. And on the 9th of those days, when I had gone as far as I could go and could see the wall in front of me, I did the thing I had been avoiding, because it felt like a small woman pulling a very large bell rope. I wrote to the patron of the Crown Kennels. The kennels have had a royal patron for 200 years, and for the last 9 of them the patron has been Princess Adela, the king's sister, who breeds nothing, sells nothing, and misses nothing, who once stood in my surgery at 2 in the morning holding a torch while I took a fish hook out of a young dog's tongue, and who did not once say asterisk, "Do you know who I am?" and did not need to. I wrote her 4 pages. I put in the list, and the gap in the file, and Yarrow's boat, and the algal water, and the phrase asterisk 14 or 15 a year asterisk, and I put in the ear tattoo, and I put in a sentence I rewrote 9 times and which read in the end, "Ma'am, The seal at the bottom of the paper that sold that dog into a chain is the seal of the establishment of which you are patron, and I did not know how to look at it and say nothing. I had the reply in 31 hours. It was 3 lines long, and it was written by hand. Dr. Hale, I have read every page twice. The registrar will attend me at Ashmere on Friday, and he will bring the disposal ledgers, all of them, and he will not be told why. You will also attend. Adela. Friday, at Ashmere, in the long room over the yard, with the rain on the windows and 200 dogs making their evening noise below, was the nearest thing to a victory I have ever been part of, and it lasted about 4 hours. Princess Adela let Oswin Drage talk for 40 minutes. She let him be charming. She let him spread his hands and be reasonable and say, "I cannot police a man's soul, ma'am asterisk," and I watched her face, and it was a wall with a light behind it. Then she asked him, in a perfectly ordinary voice, why the disposal ledger for the 4th quarter of the year before last was written in 2 inks. I have seen a man's charm go off him like water off a stone. He tried 3 things, a mistake, a clerk, an oversight, and she let him try all 3, and then she opened the 2nd ledger which Petrie had found and which Drage had not known existed, and she laid the 2 side by side and turned them both around so that he could see them, and she said, "22, Mr. Drage. Not 14, not 15. 22 and 3 buyers, and every one of them a dog that could not be sold to anyone who wanted a dog to asterisk love." And Oswin Drage sat down without being asked. He was suspended that evening, and the ledgers went to the constabulary that night, and the princess signed the order for a full inquiry with a pen she borrowed from me and did not give back. At 11 o'clock, she stood in the doorway with her collar turned up and said, "The magistrates sit on the dog on Tuesday, doctor. I cannot direct a magistrate, and if I tried, the newspapers would have it in a day, and it would do that animal more harm than good." She pulled on her gloves. "But I can apply as patron for the Crown Kennels to be joined to the application as an interested party, on the ground that the animal is Crown-bred, Crown-marked, and possibly Crown asterisk owned, if the disposal was procured by fraud, which it plainly was." "Ma'am, it means," she said, "that on Tuesday morning nobody may destroy that dog until the court has heard us. It is not a rescue, Dr. Hale. It is a asterisk stay asterisk. It is 11 feet of rope, and I have thrown it as far as I can throw it. I got home at 1 in the morning and slept for the first time in a fortnight, and I want to record that I was happy, and that I have never in my life been so wrong. Tuesday was the 4th of Haymonth. 2 things were happening in the city on the 4th of Haymonth, and I had known about the second one for a month, the way you know about weather. At 10 o'clock, the magistrates would hear the application concerning a dangerous animal. And at 11, in the great forecourt of the palace, in front of 30,000 people and every camera in Eldermore, Crown Prince Rowan would review the household regiments and present the colors, with King Alaric on the dais and the massed bands on the gravel and the whole gilded weight of the realm turned out in the sun. I was at the magistrates' court at 8:30 with my folder. Constable Hobb was there. The kennel's advocate was there. At 8:45 the clerk came out and told us that the applicant's solicitor had been on the telephone, that his client was regrettably delayed, and that in any case, since the animal had not been produced for examination by the court's own veterinary assessor at 9. "Where is the dog?" I said. The clerk looked at his paper. "The Pound at the Wicket Lanes reports that the animal was collected by its registered owner at 6 o'clock this morning," he said, "which he is entitled to do, as the seizure order is not yet." I was already running. I got out of that courtroom and down the steps and into my van, and I sat with my hands on the wheel and the engine running, and I made myself think, because thinking was the only thing left that was any use. Slake had a hearing at 10. He had a lawyer and a beautiful application and every reason on earth to walk into that court, and instead he had gone at 6 in the morning to a pound in the Wicket Lanes and taken his dog off a chain and vanished. Which meant he had done the sum I had done. He had a princess joined to the application. He had a registrar suspended, and a second ledger in the hands of the constabulary, and 22 names, and a veterinary surgeon with photographs. He was not going to win his order. He had one thing left, one weapon, and it was 90 pounds of black and tan on a chain, and its value to him was not what it could do to a man. Its value was what it could be made to look like asterisk. Get that dog in front of the cameras once more. Get him loose in a crowd, screaming and driving, and this time do not let a guardsman go down on one heel and whisper to him. This time let him asterisk do asterisk it. Let him take a fistful of scarlet sleeve in front of 30,000 people, and no court in Eldermore, no magistrate, no princess, no veterinary surgeon with a folder of photographs will be able to save him. The dog dies, the evidence dies, and the man who put his rifle down and knelt on the cobblestones goes down with him. I looked at the clock on the dashboard of my van. It said 9:41. And a mile and a half away, in the great forecourt, 30,000 people were finding their places in the sun, and the massed bands were tuning, and Corporal Ansel Rooke, restored to the public rail 4 days earlier by a tired captain who had finally got angry about something, was standing at the head of the South Line with a rifle in his hands, in front of his king. I have been asked many times how I got through that crowd. I got through it because I had a kennel van with the Crown's arms on the door and a warrant card in my teeth, and because a young sergeant of police on the eastern barrier looked at my face and made a decision in about a second and a half, and because I ran the last 200 yards along the inside of the barrier line with a slip lead in one fist and a muzzle in the other, past 30,000 people, screaming a description of a man into a radio that a constable had shoved into my hand. The bands were playing something bright and enormous, and the sun was out, and the colors were coming down the line, and Crown Prince Rowan was standing bareheaded at the dais with his hand raised, and the whole of it was so beautiful and so orderly, and so entirely unable to see what was walking into it. He was on the western barrier, 3rd row, a heavy jacket on a hot day. I saw him at 40 yards and I could not get to him, because there were 400 people between us and a steel barrier and a wall of scarlet backs, and I did the only thing left, which was to stop, and put both hands to my mouth, and shout one word across the head of a national ceremony. ANSCL. A guardsman does not turn his head. It is the first thing they learn and the last thing they forget, and there were 2,000 men on that gravel who did not turn their heads. One did. Corporal Ansel Rooke, at the head of the South Line, turned his head and found me in a crowd of 30,000, and I pointed with my whole arm across the forecourt at a man in a heavy jacket on the western barrier who was at that moment crouching down and unclipping a leash. And Rooke moved. I want to describe what he did with precision, because for the rest of my life people will tell me that he charged in, and he did not. What he did was hand his rifle sideways to the man beside him. The second time in his life he has done that, and both times without a flicker. And then he stepped out of the line, 3 long strides, into the empty gravel between the crowd and the dais, into the open, alone, in front of 30,000 people and his king. And he stopped there and turned side on, and let his hands fall open. Slake screamed the word. Take. The barrier went over not from the dog, from the people going backward. 90 pounds of black and tan came out of that crowd and onto the gravel, and the bands died raggedly, note by note, and somewhere a woman was screaming, and somewhere a horse was going up, and 30,000 people made the sound a crowd makes when it understands something all at once. And that dog came across the open gravel of the palace forecourt at a dead run, at the only man in the world who had ever been kind to him, with his teeth bare and his mind gone. Rooke dropped his eyes. He did not shout. He did not raise a hand. He looked at a patch of gravel 3 feet to his left, and he let his shoulders go slack, and he stood there like a wall in a field. And when that dog was 12 feet out, he made a sound that the microphones on the dais picked up and that the whole realm has now heard. A low 2-note whistle, dropping. And then flat and slow, and without one grain of fear in it. Hold! The dog's front feet went out from under him. He slewed. Gravel went up in a spray, and he came round hard, and he was up and driving again, in a tight circle now, round the man, round and round, with his hackles in a black ridge and that broken half-growl tearing out of him, and he was hunting for permission. He wanted so badly to be told, by anybody, what he was, and the two voices in his head were pulling him apart on the gravel in front of his king. Slake was over the barrier now. He was out on the gravel himself, and there were guardsmen converging on him from the west, and he did not care. He was past caring. His face was a hole in the air. Take him. Ruin. Take him. Take. Corporal Rooke went down on one heel. Sidon eyes off. And he laid the back of one white glove flat on the gravel, palm up, an offer of nothing at all, and he said the 3 words in the old rhythm, in the voice that had been the first voice that animal ever heard. Off steady, line. The circling stopped. He stood there, 8 feet out, shaking so hard I could see it from 40 yards, with his sides going and his ears coming up off his skull and his ruined tail beginning, very slightly, to move. Take, shrieked Corbin Slake. Bracken, said Corporal Ansel Rooke. And that dog crossed the gravel, low and crooked and crying, and put his forehead into a white glove, and turned, and sat down at the guardsman's left knee, facing out square, with his front feet placed and his ears up and his chest lifted, in the exact position that a K7 dog is taught before he is taught anything else in the world. Line. He came to heel. In front of the king, in front of the colors, in front of 30,000 people and every camera in Eldermore, that dog came to heel and put himself between his handler and the crowd and guarded him. And Corbin Slake, alone on the gravel, screaming the word over and over into a silence you could have leaned against, watched 90 pounds of everything he had made turn around and not come. He went for Rooke himself in the end. Of course he did. A man like that has nothing else. He came across the gravel with his hand going into that heavy jacket, and there was a chain in it, and he got perhaps 4 strides. The dog rose. He did not bite him. I have said that in 3 courtrooms, and I will say it here. Bracken came up off his haunches and put his body across his handler's front and stood there, 4 feet from a running man, dead still, tail up for the first time in 3 years, and he barked once. Once, and it went off the palace stone like a gun. Slake stopped as though he had walked into a wall. He stood there with the chain hanging out of his fist and his mouth open, and he looked at that dog, and that dog looked back at him and did not move so much as a foot, and every single person in that forecourt understood at exactly the same moment which of the 2 of them was the animal. Then 6 guardsmen of the household came over the gravel in a line and took him down, and took the chain out of his hand, and it was done inside 4 seconds, and there was nothing to see and nothing to enjoy about it. On the dais, Crown Prince Rowan lowered his hand. Hold him, he said, to nobody in particular and to the whole realm. That man is not to be let go. And King Alaric, who had not moved through any of it, stood up. Whether he meant it for the guardsman or for the dog, I do not know, and I have never asked, and I have my own view. The magistrates sat on the dog 11 days later, and it took 40 minutes. Corbin Slake was brought from custody, because he was still in law the owner, and his application was still in law before the court. His good lawyer had gone. He stood in the dock in a suit that did not fit him and told the bench in that pleasant carrying voice that the animal was uncontrollable, that it had attacked a guardsman twice, that it was a danger to the public, and that with regret he asked for its destruction. The chairman of the bench was a small, dry woman of about 70, who had listened to a great many men in her time. "Mr. Slake," she said, "you say the animal will not be controlled. Control it." He did not understand her. He asked her to repeat it. "There is a dog in the yard of this court," she said, "in the lawful custody of the Crown Kennels, and you say he is yours. Very well. The court will step outside, and you will call him, and if he comes to you I shall know that you are his owner, and I shall listen to your application with an open mind." So we went out into the yard behind the magistrate's court, all of us, the bench, the clerk, the advocates, 2 constables, a veterinary surgeon of the Crown Kennels with her hand through a slip lead, and I took the lead off, and I stood back, and Corbin Slake called his dog. He called him for nearly 2 minutes. He used the name, he used the word. He used the voice he had used in the yard in the rain. And then, when that failed him in front of a magistrate and a clerk and the open sky, he used another one, higher and thinner and pleading, and that was the worst thing I have ever heard a man do. Bracken sat in the middle of the yard with his ears up and looked at him with polite, absolute, uninterested attention, the way a dog looks at a hedge. And when Slake at last took a step toward him, that dog got up and turned and walked across the flagstones and sat down at the left knee of a man in a plain coat and mended boots who had been standing at the gate since 8 that morning without a word to anybody, and put his chin against the man's leg and let out a long breath and closed his eyes. The chairman of the bench looked at that for a while. "The application is dismissed," she said. "The animal is not dangerous. The animal is stolen." Corbin Slake was sentenced in the autumn, 3 counts of causing unnecessary suffering, 2 of setting a dog on a person, 1 of obtaining crown property by fraud, and 1, which the prosecutor asked for and got, and which I asked to be read out twice, of asterisk cruelty to an animal by systematic terrorization asterisk. He got 4 years, a lifetime disqualification from keeping any animal, and the loudest silence I have ever heard from a public gallery. Oswin Drage was tried in the spring, and pleaded and wept, and went to prison for 6, and the 22 dogs on my list were traced, all but 4, and I still look for those 4, and I will look for them until I die. 18 were recovered alive. 14 of them in the end could be rehomed. 4 went to the farm in the north, where there is a fire and where the old ones go. Princess Adela, as patron, rewrote the disposal rules of the Crown Kennels in 9 pages that begin with a single sentence I had framed and hung in the tower. No dog bred by the Crown shall be given away to a stranger, ever again, for any reason on any paper. Every K7 dog decommissioned since has gone out through a handler, to a handler, with a name and a home and a visit at 6 months. It is a great deal more trouble, that is rather the point. And on a cold, clear morning in frost month, in the quadrangle at Ashmere, with the runs roaring and the wind coming down off the northern hills, King Alaric restored a service number to the roll of the Crown Kennels of Eldermore, K. VII/40,118, kennel name Bracken, Dam Wick, Sire Halloran's Fen, and wrote against it in his own hand, in the column where the appointment goes. Foundation dog, K7, attached to Corporal A. Rooke. They made Ansel Rooke a kennel master. He asked to keep 2 days a week at the rail and got them, and he stands them still. The flat stone, the red tunic, the bearskin, the white gloves, the eyes forward at nothing at all. The other 5 days he is at Ashmere in a canvas coat with his hip aching in the wet, teaching 8-week-old pups their 3 words in a flat northern voice. And there is a big black and tan dog with a gray muzzle and a ruined tail who walks the puppy lines beside him and who is worth, as a teacher, any 4 men I have ever employed. Bracken shows them what a fair deal looks like. They learn it off him in a week. People still send me the film. The Whisper, they call it. 11 million, then 30, then a number I stopped looking at. But it is the wrong film, and it is the wrong 9 seconds, and I have given up saying so. Because the thing I saw on the palace forecourt was not a man taming a monster. There was never a monster. There was a good dog, out of a great bitch, bred and shaped for 200 years to want nothing on this earth so much as a fair human being to work for. And there was a man with a chain who spent 11 months teaching him that no such person existed. And then, one bright morning, in front of 60 phones, that dog was told to go and kill a man in a red tunic, and he ran at him with his teeth bare and his mind gone white, and 12 feet out he heard 2 notes and 1 word out of his own puppyhood, and he found out that he had been lied to. That is all it was, a dog who was told the truth by the man who had told it to him first. You may keep your 9 seconds. I will keep the yard at Ashmere in the frost, and a guardsman on one heel with his glove flat on the ground, and a dog coming home.